What's going on, guys? Tyson the Trainer here, back with Sports Talk, back with another video. Today I have my notes so I can make sure I remember everything for you. Today I want to talk to you about the importance between the aerobic system and the anaerobic system, okay? So basically when I talk to you about, these type of things, they both have their place as an athlete, whether you are someone who's an endurance athlete, whether you're someone who's like an MMA fighter or a boxer or something like that, whether you're someone who's a weightlifter in general. Both of these type of cardiovascular adaptations, I guess you would say, or cardiovascular modalities are important as an athlete overall. And I want to cover these differences to you to give you an idea about why they are important and how they both can, help with your performance overall, right? So basically we're going to start off with the aerobic system first. So with the aerobic system, we actually have different areas of the aerobic system we can kind of look at. So we have the aerobic glycolysis, the aerobic glycolysis and the aerobic lipolysis, right? So glycolysis using glycogen or glucose, and then lipolysis using fat as a fuel source. And so based on our heart rate, it's actually going to determine whether we're going to be using the fat as a fuel source or carbohydrates as a fuel source, right? And this is both in the aerobic system again. So aerobic means with oxygen, and then anaerobic means without oxygen, okay? So we're saying that when you sit roughly, based on how old you are, the general rule for finding our heart rate max is 220, take away our age, okay? So for me, being 26, 220 take 26 is 194 beats per minute is my heart rate max, technically, okay? So when I'm going to train with my aerobic system, if I'm going to train my aerobic lipolysis for the most part, using fat as a fuel source, my heart rate's going to sit between below 130. So basically from what I'm doing now is lipolysis. So sitting between here, which is resting heart rate, all the way up to a heart rate of about 140 beats per minute. So usually, if you're more of a trained athlete, you can push your heart rate max to about 80% of your heart rate max using fat as a fuel source, okay? As you're a trained athlete. I think it's 70 or 80%, around that 70% mark maybe. And then after that, you change into aerobic glycolysis, right? Using carbohydrates as a fuel source. And so with that, we're training both of these things because when we use the aerobic system, what we're doing is we're doing a few different things. Number one, we're building up mitochondrial density. So we're building up more mitochondria. And one thing that, is said in the endurance world is miles make mitochondria. So the more you train in the endurance setting, in the, the lower heart rate setting, the more mitochondria you're going to build up, which is beneficial because the more mitochondria we have, mitochondria is a powerhouse of the cell, means we can produce, more aerobic power overall and keep up our aerobic system. It also improves our lung capacity, our oxygen capacity, so how much oxygen we can take in, how it travels around the body, and how we can keep ourselves going. And this is also why our VO2 max increases over time. So with a higher VO2 max, we can take more oxygen in, means that we can get more blood going around the body, more oxygen around the body, obviously. And then with that means we can actually perform better. So, having aerobic capacity and also an anaerobic capacity and working on both of those increases your VO2 max, makes you a fitter individual overall, means you can go longer, means you can maintain a higher intensity, which are two important things for any sport. Again, even if you're an Olympic lifter or you're a power lifter, being able to maintain a higher intensity, especially if you're doing singles, doubles, triples, and you've got to keep that high intensity mind, that type of thing, we want to make sure we're able to do that. And so even having a good cardiovascular health helps you have a lower rest time too, because you're going to be able to recover faster. So that's one important thing. Right? Again, mitochondria and having a bigger VO2 max. So I guess they're two different things. Another one is blood vessels, helping with blood vessels overall, and creating bigger blood vessels. So again, it means more blood is able to move around the body. Means again, the more we can get blood around the body and oxygen around the body, the faster we can have ATP turnover in a degree, but also the faster we can just recover and regenerate and continuously keep pushing forward. So the aerobic system really does have some benefits overall for cardiovascular health, but it's also the aerobic system means you training more of that, which is predominantly, again, like I say, 80% of your training should be done on that side of things. It also means when you train more in the aerobic system, you can recover more. You can recover faster. You can repeat the same efforts again and again. If you're riding, like for me yesterday, I rode an hour and a half on the bike, sitting at about 145 beats per minute, okay? I got off the bike, I didn't feel wrecked, I didn't feel gassed, I didn't feel fatigued, I don't have a chance of injury. I can get back on the bike if I wanted to today and do something, or I can go and do weight training today without killing myself. So the lower intensity side of things, and the aerobic threshold, is great because it allows us to repeat our training again and again. It reduces our risk of injury. It helps us, like I said, build up more mitochondria, blood vessels, improve our VO2 max. And it just, there's so many benefits to having a good aerobic system. And one of the biggest things, like I said, repeat bouts. The more you can repeat a bout, the more chance you have of building up mitochondria, the more you have of increasing cardiovascular health, and the more it's going to carry over to every area of your life. And also, with just saying that, it reduces your risk of cardiovascular disease and all-cause mortality by having a good cardiovascular system. So that's why it's really important to have that side of things, right? And it's also, so we also build up more slow twitch muscle fibers. So we have fast twitch and slow twitch muscle fibers. Low intensity training or the aerobic system is usually going to use more slow twitch muscle fibers, which is still important. You know, we want to make sure we have a bit of both. We want to make sure we have certain muscles that are going to be more biased towards type 2, and we're going to have muscles that are biased towards type 1. But either way, having type 1 muscle fibers is not a bad thing overall, because it's just the way our body is. We want to have a mixture of those two things. All right. So I'm pretty sure I covered all that. So we talked about slow twitch muscle fibers. We talked about bigger blood vessels, mitochondria, and yeah, we did. And again, sorry, the last thing, you can use more fat during your workout. So using more fat during your workout, basically what that's going to mean is that you can continuously work out for longer periods of time. So even though I cycled for an hour and a half yesterday, I could have cycled for 3 hours because my intensity was that low. I was using fat as a fuel source. I have a lot of fat as my fuel source in the end of the day. And so that means I can keep turning over my ATP and keeping exercising. The higher that goes, the more likely we are, the more we start to use glycolysis, the more we start to break down glycogen from our muscles, and the lower we're going to be able to sustain that intensity or to sustain our exercise overall, because there's only so much glycogen we have stored in our body. And the more we start to push, the more the glycogen goes down. So even when you're training in the fat burning zone, you're still going to use a little bit of glycogen because we're still contracting muscle, but it's also preserving muscle glycogen versus going higher intensity and using more muscle glycogen. So that's the aerobic system, and that's why it's important. Now the anaerobic system. So the anaerobic system without oxygen, okay? Now the cool thing about the anaerobic system is that this is also a great way to build up a VO2 max. So doing high intensity interval training. Now true high intensity interval training is basically going all out, pushing yourself as hard as you can for a short amount of time without oxygen, okay? So when you're doing hill sprints, when you're doing intervals on the, again, if I was to say cycling, if you're doing boxing, 30 seconds, bang, 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 as fast as you can, you know, anything that's hard, but you cannot sustain for a long period of time. Teaching your body to it's not really teaching your body using muscles and to push to do something without the use of oxygen, which is why we can't sustain it for a certain period of time. We just can't get oxygen in fast enough, and we can't turn over cellular ATP fast enough to use that energy, which is why we can't sustain those high intensity things, right? But the cool thing about the anaerobic system, which still kind of falls into weight training, when we use the anaerobic system, we are building type 2 muscle fibers, so more explosive muscle fibers, right? So a good idea of kind of giving an idea about type 2 muscle fibers, like our quads. You know, if we're going to do a sprint or anything like that, we're going to be using our quad muscles. We want that fast explosiveness, and that's going to come from a type 2 muscle fiber. You know, as an Olympic lifter, as a power lifter, more of an Olympic lifter, you know, you want that explosiveness. So with that, we want to make sure that you're doing the anaerobic side of things, which is 1 to 3 or 4 reps basically. And when you're doing that, you are using no oxygen to do that exercise, and you are also changing your type 2 muscle fibers, which means you're going to be more explosive overall. That's the weightlifting side of things, I guess, or the training. With the cardio side of things, that also means that you're going to be able to build up a better lactate threshold. And so with a lactate threshold means when we are training, we build up hydrogen in our muscles. And if we can't clear that hydrogen fast enough, we get that burning sensation and we can't continue the exercise. But as you get better and as you can, as you increase your anaerobic threshold, I guess you would say, it'd be an anaerobic threshold, you're going to be able to build up your lactate threshold. And when you build up your lactate threshold, you're going to be able to push at high intensities. And this is why when we look at actual marathon runners, they can sustain a very high intensity of training that not normal people can sustain to build up, because they have a high lactate threshold and they can push through. And again, we can also mitigate that with supplements and things like that, like beta-alanine or black carb soda and stuff like that to help with a hydrogen buffer. But at the end of the day, you know, training ourselves to build up our anaerobic capacity is also going to be beneficial for that, to teach ourselves to, you know, have a higher lactate threshold, be able to have a higher sustaining VO2 max overall too. So having a higher VO2 max will also be beneficial, because when you're training without oxygen and you are training your body to be able to push without it, it also means that you're going to be absorbing oxygen back in when you're resting, and the more you're able to do that, the bigger your VO2 max is going to be, and be able to still continue to bring oxygen around the body overall. So fast twitch muscle fibers were covered. I talked about lactate acid. What else did I forget? Increased glycolysis, ATP resynthesis basically, and the creatine. So basically, you know, we will be able to regenerate, I guess, energy faster to replicate that and continuously do it at a higher intensity. So basically, you know, you're going to start off doing one high intensity session, let's say, or again, you're doing 1 or 3 reps with whatever it's going to be. And it's going to be hard at first. Your body's going to be trying to get used to it. But after a few weeks, you adapt and you're able to turn that over faster. And then you're also able to recover faster, okay? Now, the downside of things with the anaerobic training, especially with the high intensity training, is that it's very demanding on the body. It's very hard for recovery. And this is why, again, for a lot of people who are doing weight training per se, whether it be bodybuilding, Olympic lifting, powerlifting, all those type of things, if that's your main sport, using lower intensity cardio for your other type of cardio is going to be more beneficial than high intensity training. If you're someone who's doing an endurance sport and stuff like that, you want to make sure you're doing a combination of both, but you should also make sure you're doing some type of weight training there just for strength overall, but you don't have to worry about your power or anything like that. So, you know, you want to, either way, whatever our goals are going to be, we want to have a combination of both our anaerobic and our aerobic system, because having both is going to be beneficial for overall health. And again, like, it's going to be beneficial for you as your performance, okay? So they both play their part. They're both important at the end of the day. We want to make sure we do both, but I just wanted to kind of give you guys an idea about why they're important and why we should be making sure we're including all of them in our training regime for whatever type of training you're actually doing. So that is the video. I am Tyson the Trainer with 2 R's. If you guys have any questions, as always, hit me up on Instagram at Tyson the Trainer 2 R's. And until next time, I'll speak to you then.